I spent my entire youth trying to prove my worth to a family that never truly valued me. But everything shattered with one cold sentence during a family brunch. If you've ever felt like an outsider in your own family, stay with me until the very end of this story. My name is Madeline Foster, and I've always been the invisible middle child in what appeared to be the perfect American family. From the outside, the Fosters were everything a successful family should be. My father, a renowned cardiac surgeon, my mother, a former model turned socialite who ran charity galas with the precision of a military operation, my older brother James, following in Dad's footsteps with his own thriving practice, and my younger sister Charlotte, blessed with mother's bone structure and a modeling contract by 18. And then there was me. I discovered my gift for numbers early. While other children played with dolls or action figures, I was fascinated by the patterns in my father's financial statements left carelessly on his mahogany desk. By 12, I could spot discrepancies in restaurant bills faster than the waiters could print them. By 16, I was quietly managing the family's household accounts because mother found it tedious and father was too busy saving lives. Nobody noticed. They never did. The Foster family home sat like a crown jewel in Westchester County. All white columns and manicured lawns that stretched endlessly under the New York sun. Every Thanksgiving, our dining room table groaned under the weight of Mother's perfectly arranged centerpieces and Charlotte's Instagram-worthy place settings. James would arrive with his beautiful wife and their twin boys, filling the house with the kind of chaos that made Mother smile indulgently while simultaneously checking that nothing valuable was within reach of sticky fingers. I would arrive alone, always alone, carrying my signature contribution, a pie from the best bakery in Manhattan that I'd waited in line for 2 hours to obtain. Mother would accept it with a thin smile and place it on the dessert table behind Charlotte's homemade creation, though we all knew Charlotte's homemade meant her housekeeper had followed a recipe. These gatherings followed a predictable pattern. Father would hold court, discussing his latest surgical triumph while James hung on every word, occasionally interjecting with his own victories. Charlotte would regale us with stories from photo shoots and the fascinating people she'd met. Mother would orchestrate it all like a conductor, ensuring the conversation flowed smoothly from one family member to the next. They never asked about my work. Not once in 15 years did anyone inquire about the hedge fund I'd helped build from the ground up, or the algorithms I'd developed that had made my clients millions. When I was promoted to Chief Financial Officer at 32, the youngest in the company's history, I'd mentioned it briefly at dinner. Mother had murmured something about how nice before turning to ask Charlotte about her latest boyfriend. But I kept showing up, I kept contributing, because that's what family does, isn't it? What they didn't know was how deeply I was woven into the fabric of their comfortable lives. It started small, almost accidentally. Mother had been flustered one December, overwhelmed by the complexity of refinancing the house while planning her annual charity gala. I'd quietly taken over, negotiating a rate that saved them thousands annually. She'd patted my hand absently and returned to her seating charts. Then it was James's student loans, a careless investment, Charlotte's credit card debt from her finding herself phase. Each time, I stepped in silently, efficiently, expecting nothing but hoping for something. Recognition, perhaps. Gratitude. Or simply acknowledgement that I existed beyond the role of dutiful daughter who showed up when summoned. The cabin in Oregon had been my sanctuary. Grandmother Foster, Dad's mother, had been the only one who truly saw me. While the rest of the family found her difficult and eccentric, I treasured our long conversations about life beyond the Foster bubble. She'd left me a modest inheritance when she passed, and I'd used it to buy a small cabin nestled in the mountains outside Portland. It was simple, rustic, everything the Foster family home wasn't. I'd never told them about it. Some secrets were worth keeping. Over the years, I'd accumulated responsibilities like other people collected stamps. The family credit card was in my name because my credit score was impeccable. I paid the bills and was reimbursed, though the reimbursements often came late or required gentle reminders that I'd learned to phrase as casual mentions. "Oh, the Amex bill came in," I'd say lightly at dinner, and Mother would wave her hand dismissively. Just handle it, darling. You know I trust you completely with these things. Trust. Such a funny word in our family. They trusted me with their money, but not with their hearts. I managed the vacation planning because Charlotte inevitably double-booked herself, and James was too busy to research options. I found the rental properties, negotiated the rates, arranged the flights, and created detailed itineraries that Mother would present as her own handiwork. Madeline helped a tiny bit. She'd sometimes add, the way one might acknowledge a particularly useful app on their phone. The family investment portfolio was another silent responsibility I'd assumed. Father had nearly lost a fortune during the 2008 crisis. Too proud to admit he didn't understand modern markets. I'd stepped in, restructured everything, and turned losses into gains. He'd grumbled about newfangled strategies, but never objected when the quarterly statements showed steady growth. I paid for Charlotte's therapy after her third devastating breakup, though she didn't know it was me. The bills went to a trust I'd set up, and she assumed it was from our parents. I covered the down payment for James's first house when his practice was still struggling, structuring it as a loan from a family trust that he never questioned. Every Easter, 4th of July, Thanksgiving, and Christmas, I arrived at the family home like a well-trained pet. I helped Mother in the kitchen, though she criticized every slice and dice. I listened to Father's stories, though I'd heard them all before. I celebrated James's successes and Charlotte's dramas with equal enthusiasm, playing the role of supportive sister to perfection. But there were moments, tiny fractures in my carefully maintained facade. The Christmas when Charlotte received a car and I got a gift card, the birthday dinner where they forgot to set a place for me and had to squeeze in an extra chair. The family photo session where the photographer kept positioning me slightly behind everyone else because the composition looked better. I cataloged these moments like evidence in a case I'd never prosecute. They accumulated in my chest, a weight that grew heavier with each gathering, each casual dismissal, each forgotten contribution. The breaking point came, as these things often do, on an ordinary Sunday. It was late spring, and Mother had decided to host brunch on the terrace. The wisteria was in full bloom, draping purple clusters over the pergola like nature's own decoration. I'd driven up from the city early, stopping at Mother's favorite bakery in Greenwich for fresh croissants and pain au chocolat. The girl behind the counter knew me by name now, knew the Foster family's standing order by heart. I arrived to find the table already set with Mother's Hermes china. Charlotte arranging flowers she claimed to have picked from the garden, though I recognized the florist's touch in their perfect positioning. James was there with his family, the twins racing around the lawn while his wife, Patricia, sipped mimosas and complained about their nanny's latest transgression. Madeline, Mother acknowledged as I placed the bakery boxes on the sideboard. You're early. It wasn't a compliment. I poured myself coffee from the silver pot, adding just enough cream to turn it the color of caramel. The familiar bitter taste grounded me as I took my usual seat at the far end of the table, close enough to be included, but far enough to be forgotten. The conversation flowed in its typical patterns. James discussed his plans to expand his practice, dropping names of investors and colleagues like breadcrumbs of importance. Father nodded approvingly, occasionally interjecting with advice that James absorbed with reverent attention. Charlotte dominated the middle portion of brunch with a breathless account of a recent trip to Turks and Caicos with her latest boyfriend, someone in tech whose name I hadn't bothered to memorize. They never lasted long enough to matter. The yacht was absolutely gorgeous, she gushed, showing photos on her phone that everyone leaned in to admire. Bradley says we can use it anytime. Maybe we should all go for Labor Day. That sounds wonderful, darling, Mother cooed. James, would you and Patricia be able to get away? They began planning enthusiastically, discussing dates and destinations. I watched from my end of the table, invisible, as always, until Patricia mentioned the cost of flying everyone down. Oh, Madeline will handle all that, Mother said with a dismissive wave. Won't you, dear? You're so good with these things. I set down my coffee cup carefully, the fine china making a soft click against the saucer. Actually, I might have plans for Labor Day. The table fell silent. It was so rare for me to object to anything that my simple statement seemed to echo in the morning air. Mother's laugh tinkled like broken glass. Don't be silly. What plans could you possibly have that are more important than family? I was thinking of taking some time for myself, I said quietly. Maybe visiting the cabin. What cabin? Charlotte asked, for once looking directly at me instead of through me. I hadn't meant to mention it. The cabin was mine, separate from all of this, sacred in its solitude. But the words had slipped out, and now I watched as confusion rippled across their faces. I bought a place in Oregon a few years ago, I explained reluctantly, with grandmother's inheritance. Grandmother left you money. James sounded genuinely surprised. I thought her estate was divided equally. She left me her books and a small sum. I said. I invested it. Mother's face had taken on that pinched expression she wore when something didn't go according to her mental script. Well, I'm sure your little cabin will still be there after Labor Day. Family comes first, Madeline. It always has in this house. I wanted to laugh at the irony. Family came first, but I'd never truly been family. I was staff with a shared surname, a convenient resource with a blood connection. Of course, I murmured, retreating into familiar compliance. But something had shifted inside me. As I watched them continue planning their Labor Day adventure, calculating costs I would bear and logistics I would manage, that weight in my chest transformed. It wasn't sadness anymore. It was something harder, colder, more decisive. The conversation moved on to other topics. Father began discussing his plans to retire early, perhaps travel with Mother. James mentioned wanting to send the twins to private school. Charlotte hinted about needing help with a new apartment in the city, something more befitting her growing career. Each plan, each dream, each casual assumption that money would materialize to fund their desires. My money, my time, my invisible labor that kept the foster family machine running smoothly. We should probably discuss the family trust, Father said, cutting into his eggs Benedict. Make sure everything is structured properly for the next generation. Oh, Madeline handles all that, Mother said. Don't you, dear? I nodded automatically, then felt the words rising in my throat like bile. Actually, I've been meaning to discuss some changes to our financial arrangements. Another silence, this one heavier. Charlotte actually put down her phone. Changes. Father's tone carried the subtle warning I remembered from childhood, the one that suggested I was overstepping. Small things, I backpedaled instinctively. Just some restructuring for tax purposes. Well, handle it as you see fit, he said, already dismissing the topic. You know we trust your judgment. There it was again. Trust. They trusted me to manage their wealth, but not to have opinions. To solve their problems, but not to have my own. To exist in the margins of their lives, useful, but not essential. The conversation resumed, flowing around me like water around a stone. Charlotte needed new headshots. James was considering a vacation home. Mother wanted to renovate the guest house. Each want presented as a need. Each expense assumed to be manageable because Madeline would manage it. I excused myself to use the bathroom, but instead found myself in Father's study. The room smelled of leather and old scotch, walls lined with medical journals he never read and awards that meant everything to him. His desk was cluttered with papers, and I recognized my own handwriting on several financial documents awaiting his signature. Through the window, I could see the terrace where my family continued their brunch. They were laughing at something, probably one of Charlotte's stories. The tableau they made was perfect: the successful doctor, the elegant wife, the accomplished son, the beautiful daughter. A family complete in itself, lacking nothing. Certainly not lacking me. My absence hadn't even been noticed. I returned to the terrace as quietly as I'd left, sliding back into my chair like a ghost resuming its haunt. Charlotte was showing more photos, this time from a fashion shoot. Mother was planning her next charity event. James was discussing golf with Father. Oh, Madeline, Mother said without looking at me. I'll need you to review the catering contracts for the gala. The prices seem inflated this year. When is it? I asked, though I knew perfectly well I'd been managing the gala's finances for 5 years. Next month, as always, honestly, Madeline. Sometimes I wonder where your head is. Charlotte giggled. Probably lost in all those numbers. I don't know how you stand it. Maddie, so boring. Someone has to do it, I said mildly. Exactly. Mother agreed, missing the edge in my voice. And we're so fortunate you're good at it. Though really, we're all just trying to be nice, including you in everything. Don't think you matter. The words fell into the morning air like stones into still water. Everything stopped. Mother continued spreading jam on her croissant. Oblivious to the bomb she'd just detonated, Charlotte was already back on her phone. James was feeding pieces of pancake to the twins. Father was reading something on his tablet. But Patricia, James's wife, had frozen with her mimosa halfway to her lips. She was the only one who seemed to register what had just been said. And I saw something flicker across her face. Pity. Perhaps. Or recognition. She'd married into this family. She knew what it was like to be on the periphery. What did you say? I asked, my voice steady despite the earthquake happening inside my chest. Mother looked up, mildly irritated at having to repeat herself. I said we try to include you, dear. We know you're not. She gestured vaguely. Like the rest of us. But family is family. We're just trying to be nice, I repeated slowly. Including me. Well, yes. She seemed puzzled by my focus on this. You know how busy everyone is, but we make an effort. An effort. The words tasted like ash. To include me, because you're trying to be nice. James finally looked up from the twins. Mom, maybe that's not exactly... Oh, don't be so sensitive, Madeline. Mother cut him off. You know what I mean. We all have our roles. Yours is... Well, you're very useful. Useful. Like a good appliance. Like a well-programmed computer. Like a servant who happened to share their DNA. I stood up slowly, placing my napkin beside my barely touched plate. The movement felt momentous, like tectonic plates shifting after decades of pressure. Where are you going? Charlotte asked, perhaps sensing something different in my posture. I'm leaving, I said simply. But we haven't discussed the vacation plans. Mother protested. Or the gala budget. I looked at her. Really looked at her for perhaps the first time in years. She was still beautiful in that carefully maintained way. Every hair in place, every line minimized by expensive treatments I'd probably paid for indirectly. But there was something empty in her eyes when she looked at me. Not cruelty, exactly. Just absence. I simply didn't register as important enough to be cruel to. I'm sure you'll figure it out, I said. Don't be dramatic, Father said without looking up from his tablet. Sit down and finish your meal. But I was already walking away, my steps steady on the flagstone path. Behind me. I heard Charlotte mutter something about typical Madeline and Mother's responding titter of agreement. I drove back to the city in silence, my hands steady on the wheel despite the storm raging inside me. Every mile put distance between me and that terrace, that table, that casual dismissal of my entire existence. My apartment on the Upper East Side was a sanctuary of my own making. Clean lines, minimal decoration, everything in shades of gray and white. It was sophisticated and cold, much like I'd trained myself to be. But now, as I stood in my living room looking out at the city skyline, I felt something crack inside me. The tears came suddenly, violently. Years of suppressed hurt pouring out in ugly sobs that would have horrified Mother. I sank onto my couch, pulling my knees to my chest like a child, and let myself feel the full weight of it. They'd never loved me, never even seen me, really. I was a function, not a person. A useful tool in the foster family toolkit. Pulled out when needed and forgotten when not. My cat, a rescue tabby named Marcus, emerged from his hiding spot and curled against my side, purring with feline determination. I buried my face in his fur and cried until I had nothing left. When the tears finally stopped, I felt empty but strangely clear. Like a fever had broken, I stood up, washed my face, and opened my laptop. The Foster family finances spread across my screen in neat columns and careful calculations. Years of my work, my diligence, my protection of their wealth. I studied it all with new eyes, seeing not just numbers, but the architecture of my own imprisonment. I'd made myself indispensable, hoping it would make me loved. Instead, it had made me invisible. My phone buzzed. A text from Mother, "Don't forget about the catering contracts. Need them by Monday." No apology. No acknowledgement of what she'd said. Just another task for useful Madeline. I deleted the text without responding and pulled up a different screen. My personal accounts. The cabin deed. The various trusts and instruments I'd created over the years. Everything was here. Waiting. I called my lawyer, Daniel Chen, who picked up on the second ring despite it being Sunday evening. "Madeline, everything okay? I need to restructure some things," I said. "Can you meet me tomorrow?" "Of course, anything urgent?" I looked at the family photo on my bookshelf. All of us in coordinating white and blue for Mother's 60th birthday. I was on the end, slightly apart, my smile not quite reaching my eyes. "Yes," I said. "I think it is." The next few days passed in a blur of activity. I worked with the focused intensity that had made me successful. But now that focus was turned inward, toward extraction rather than support. First, the cabin. I'd been foolish to mention it at brunch, but perhaps that slip had been necessary. A crack in my perfect servant facade. I arranged for it to be put on the market immediately, priced to sell fast. The real estate agent was thrilled. Properties in that area were in high demand. Next, the credit cards. The family had been using a premium card in my name for years, racking up points and benefits while I managed the bills and reimbursements. I called American Express and requested new cards for everyone, in their own names. Their credit scores would have to stand on their own merit now. The investment accounts were trickier. Some were in trust, requiring formal procedures to modify, but others were simply informal arrangements. Money I'd moved and managed based on verbal agreements and family trust. Those I could handle more directly. I spent hours creating detailed documentation of every financial decision I'd made on the family's behalf. Every loan covered, every bill paid, every investment managed. The numbers were staggering when laid out comprehensively. I'd been subsidizing their lifestyle to the tune of hundreds of thousands of dollars annually, not counting my unpaid labor as their personal financial manager. Daniel reviewed everything with the careful attention that made him worth his substantial hourly rate. "This is quite a shift. Madeline, may I ask what prompted it?" I told him about the brunch, keeping my voice steady and factual. He listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes. "I see," he said when I finished. "And your goal?" "Complete financial separation. I want to ensure they have no claim on my assets and no expectation of my continued support." That's relatively straightforward, given how you've structured things. You've been very careful to keep clear documentation. "I learned from the best," I said, thinking of Grandmother Foster and her meticulous records. "There is one complication," Daniel continued. "The shared credit account, closing it abruptly could impact their credit scores." "They're adults," I said. "They can manage their own credit." He nodded slowly. "I'll draft the necessary letters. When do you want to execute?" "Friday," I decided, end of business day. That gave me 5 days to prepare. 5 days to continue the charade of being useful Madeline while I carefully extracted myself from their financial web. The messages started Wednesday. Mother needed help with the gala budget. Charlotte wanted advice on negotiating her new apartment lease. James asked if I could review his practice's financial statements. Father forwarded tax documents without even a greeting. I responded to each with my usual efficiency, providing exactly what they asked for. But I didn't offer more. No suggestions for cost savings on the gala. No offer to negotiate Charlotte's lease myself. No comprehensive analysis of James's practice. Just the bare minimum of what was requested. They didn't notice the difference. Friday arrived gray and drizzly, matching my mood. I sat in my office at the hedge fund, watching the rain streak down the windows as I composed the email that would change everything. To the foster family, I began, then deleted it. Too formal. Dear family, I tried again. Better. The email was brief, professional, and unambiguous. Effective immediately. I would no longer be managing any family financial matters. The shared credit account would be closed within 30 days, giving them time to establish their own payment methods. All automatic payments I'd been handling would need to be transferred to their own accounts. Investment management would cease, and they would need to engage their own financial advisor if they wished to continue active portfolio management. I attached a comprehensive document detailing every account, every payment schedule, every financial obligation I'd been handling. It ran to 47 pages. At 4:47 p.m., I hit send. Then I closed the credit account, effective in 30 days as promised. I removed myself from all shared investment accounts. I canceled my access to their various bills and subscriptions, one by one. I severed the financial threads that had bound me to them. My phone started ringing at 5:03 p.m. Mother, I let it go to voicemail. By 5:30, I had 17 missed calls and dozens of texts. I read them with the same detached interest I might give a market report. Mother, Madeline, this is ridiculous. Call me immediately. James, what the hell are you having some kind of breakdown? Charlotte, OMG, are you seriously doing this right before I move? Father, this is unacceptable. We need to discuss this like adults. I turned off my phone and went to my regular Friday yoga class. For 90 minutes, I focused on nothing but breath and movement, letting their panic exist somewhere outside my immediate reality. When I returned home, Marcus greeted me with his usual enthusiasm, weaving between my legs as I prepared his dinner. The normal routine grounded me, reminding me that life would continue beyond this moment of upheaval. I turned my phone back on to find the expected deluge. Voicemails full of varying degrees of anger, disbelief, and demands. Text messages that ranged from pleading to threatening. Emails that I deleted without reading. The only message I responded to was from Patricia, James's wife. I understand why you're doing this. Good for you. Saturday morning brought a new wave of attempts at contact. The doorman called to say my mother was in the lobby, demanding to be let up. I told him I wasn't receiving visitors. She waited for 2 hours before finally leaving. Charlotte tried a different approach, sending a long text about how I was destroying the family. How could I be so selfish? Didn't I understand they needed me? I almost responded to that one, wanting to point out the irony of being called selfish after years of selfless service. But silence seemed more appropriate. Sunday was quieter. They were regrouping, perhaps. Or maybe the reality was sinking in. I spent the day organizing my apartment, removing the few family photos I'd displayed, boxing up gifts they'd given me over the years. Most were generic, impersonal things chosen without thought. A scarf that wasn't my style. A book I'd already owned. A digital picture frame, still in its original packaging. Monday brought the lawyers. Not Daniel, of course, but the foster family attorney, Mr. Whitman, whom I'd worked with on various family matters. His email was carefully worded, but essentially boiled down to the family was concerned about my mental state and wondered if I was acting under duress. Daniel handled the response, making it clear that I was of sound mind and my decisions were final. There was some back and forth about the investment accounts, questions about fiduciary responsibility and family agreements. But I'd been careful. Everything I'd done had been voluntary, documented as gifts or informal arrangements. There was no legal obligation to continue. The cabin sold by Thursday, cash offer, quick close. The profit was modest but satisfying in its symbolism. Grandmother Foster's gift had given me a sanctuary when I needed it, and now provided the final push toward freedom. Friday afternoon, I received a formal request for a family meeting. Not a demand this time, but a request. Progress. Perhaps. Or strategy. I agreed to meet them the following Sunday, but on my terms, my apartment, my timing. I spent Saturday preparing, not for battle, but for clarity. I organized all the financial documents into neat portfolios, one for each family member. everything they would need to take over their own financial management: account numbers, contact information, historical data. I even included simple instructions for basic tasks like paying bills online and checking investment balances. It was more than they deserved. Perhaps, but it felt like the right ending. Useful Madeline's last act of service. Sunday arrived crisp and bright, autumn asserting itself over the city. I arranged pastries and coffee on my dining table, a mirror of those family brunches, but simpler, cleaner. No elaborate flower arrangements or precious china. Just good coffee and fresh food on simple white plates. They arrived together, a unified front. Mother led, of course, dressed for war in Chanel. Father looked older than I remembered, or perhaps I was just seeing him clearly. James had left Patricia and the twins at home. Charlotte trailed behind, for once without her phone in hand. Madeline, Mother began as they settled awkwardly around my table. This has gone far enough. Would you like coffee? I asked, pouring for myself. We're not here for refreshments, Father said sternly. We're here to discuss your responsibilities to this family. My responsibilities? I savored the word, letting it roll around my mouth like wine. What responsibilities would those be? You know perfectly well, Mother snapped. The accounts, the investments, the unpaid labor I've been providing for 15 years, I interrupted calmly. The subsidization of your lifestyle. The constant availability for every financial need or want. Those responsibilities. James shifted uncomfortably. Madeline, we're family. Families help each other. Do they? I pulled out the portfolios I'd prepared, sliding one to each of them. Let's talk about help. Shall we? Page 1 shows the total monetary value of my help over the past 5 years, not 15, because I didn't keep detailed records before that. Just 5 years. They opened the folders reluctantly. I watched their faces change as they absorbed the numbers. This can't be right, Charlotte whispered. Every transaction is documented, I said. Every bill paid, every investment managed, every small loan that was never repaid, it's all there. We didn't ask you to, Mother began. Page 12. I interrupted. Text messages and emails asking me to handle various financial matters. Page 18. The investment gains I generated through active management. Page 25. The tax savings from strategies I implemented. Silence settled over the table like dust. They flipped through pages, seeing their casual requests transformed into cold numbers. You never said anything, James finally managed. If it was too much. When would I have said something? I asked. During the family dinners where no one asked about my work, the holidays where I was told where to sit and what to bring, but never consulted about plans, the brunches where I learned I was only included to be nice. Mother flinched at that last reference. Good. She remembered. That's not what I meant, she said weakly. Isn't it? I leaned back in my chair, feeling oddly peaceful. You meant exactly what you said. I don't matter. I'm useful, but I don't matter. At least not beyond my utility. You're twisting things, Father said, but his voice lacked its usual authority. I'm clarifying things, I corrected. For years, I've accepted my role as the family's financial janitor. Clean up the messes, keep things running, don't expect thanks or recognition, but I'm done. So you're punishing us. Charlotte's voice was small, wounded. I'm freeing us, I said. You from the burden of pretending to include me. Me from the delusion that service would someday equal love. We do love you, Mother protested. You love what I do for you, I said gently. That's not the same thing. Another silence. James cleared his throat. What do you want, Madeline? An apology. Recognition. We can. I don't want anything. I interrupted. That's what you're not understanding. I'm not negotiating. I'm informing. Your portfolios contain everything you need to manage your own finances. I've even included the contact information for several excellent financial advisors if you choose to hire professional help. Professional help costs, Charlotte began, then stopped, perhaps realizing the irony. Yes, I agreed. It does. My standard consulting rate is $800 an hour. If you're curious about market value, Father's face flushed. This is extortion. This is capitalism, I countered. You should understand that, Dad. You've certainly benefited from it. So that's it. Mother's voice had gone cold. You're just walking away from your family. I'm walking away from a job I never applied for and was never paid for. I said, if there's a family beyond that, I suppose we'll find out. They exchanged glances, having one of those wordless conversations that had always excluded me. Finally, Father stood. If this is your decision, we'll respect it, he said formally. But don't expect us to come running when you realize what you've thrown away. I won't, I assured him. One by one, they stood to leave. Charlotte paused at the door, looking back. For what it's worth, she said quietly. I'm sorry about the brunch. Mom was wrong. I nodded, acknowledging the effort even if it came too late. Take care of yourself, Charlotte. You're capable of more than you think. She left quickly, as if afraid to say more. James departed with a curt nod. Mother swept out without another word, her Chanel perfume lingering like a ghost. Father was last. He stood in my doorway, portfolio tucked under his arm like a diagnosis he didn't want to face. Your grandmother would be disappointed, he said. Actually, I replied, I think she'd be proud. She's the one who taught me to value myself, even if it took me this long to learn the lesson. He left without responding, pulling the door shut with a decisive click. I stood in my quiet apartment, listening to the muffled sounds of the city far below. Marcus emerged from wherever he'd been hiding during the confrontation, winding around my ankles with a questioning meow. It's done, I told him, scooping him into my arms. We're free. The following weeks passed in a strange calm. The frantic calls and messages tapered off as the reality of the situation sank in. I heard through professional channels that they'd hired a financial management firm, one of the ones I'd recommended. Good. They could afford the best. I received a few updates indirectly. The charity gala went forward but scaled down significantly. Charlotte managed to secure her new apartment, though not in the building she'd originally wanted. James refinanced his practice loans at less favorable terms. The Labor Day vacation became a long weekend in the Hamptons, rather than a Caribbean yacht adventure. Life, it seemed, went on, just differently. My own life expanded to fill the space their demands had occupied. I took on more challenging projects at work, finally having the mental energy to innovate rather than just maintain. I joined a book club, something I'd always wanted to do but never had time for. I started dating a fellow finance professional who found my family story horrifying and fascinating in equal measure. They really never paid you, Marcus the human one, not the cat asked over dinner one evening. They paid me in expectations, I said. And I kept hoping those expectations would transform into appreciation. That's a terrible exchange rate, he observed, making me laugh. 3 months after the break, I received a letter, handwritten, which surprised me. The foster family conducted all business electronically. It was from Patricia, James's wife. She thanked me for the years of support, acknowledged that she'd seen how I was treated and regretted not speaking up. She ended with an invitation to lunch, just the two of us, if I was ever interested. I tucked the letter into my desk drawer. A possibility for later. Maybe. The holidays approached with their usual mix of dread and nostalgia. For the first time in my adult life, I had no obligations for Thanksgiving, no pie to source, no travel plans to coordinate, no financial discussions to mediate. I booked a trip to Portland, not to visit the sold cabin, but to hike the trails I'd loved. I spent Thanksgiving on a mountain, eating trail mix and watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of amber and rose. My phone stayed off. The silence was glorious. Christmas was harder. Decades of conditioning doesn't vanish overnight. And part of me expected a call, an invitation, some acknowledgement that the family gathering was incomplete without me. But none came. I volunteered at a soup kitchen instead, serving hot meals to people who thanked me with genuine warmth. The organizer, learning about my financial skills, asked if I'd consider joining their board. I said yes. New Year's Eve found me at a party with my book club, a raucous affair that involved too much champagne and dramatic readings of terrible poetry. At midnight, as everyone kissed and hugged and made resolutions, I stood on the host's balcony, looking out at the city lights. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but curiosity won. Madeline, this is Mom. I wanted to say Happy New Year. I miss you? I stared at the words, waiting to feel something. Anger, perhaps. Or satisfaction. Or the old desperate hope that this time would be different. Instead, I felt only a quiet certainty. I typed back, Happy New Year, I hope you're well. Then I deleted the conversation and rejoined the party. Winter passed into spring. I heard occasional updates through the professional grapevine. The Foster family was managing, adapting to their new financial reality. Charlotte had taken a more active role in her career, apparently motivated by actual need rather than mere want. James had brought in a partner to his practice, sharing both profits and responsibilities. Mother had scaled back her social ambitions, focusing on one or two charities rather than trying to run the entire philanthropic scene. They were surviving, thriving, even in their own way, without me. The first anniversary of the brunch approached like a weather front, bringing unexpected emotional turbulence. I found myself replaying that morning, hearing Mother's casual dismissal with fresh ears. Don't think you matter. But I did matter. Just not to them. Not in the way I'd needed. I mattered to my clients, who trusted me with their futures. I mattered to my colleagues, who respected my expertise. I mattered to the soup kitchen board, where my financial acumen translated into more meals served. I mattered to Marcus, both of them, who showed me daily that love didn't require blood ties or elaborate demonstrations of usefulness. On the actual anniversary, I did something I hadn't done in years. I took the day off. No work, no obligations, no schedule. I wandered the city like a tourist, visiting museums I'd always meant to see, eating at restaurants I'd bookmarked but never tried. I bought flowers from a street vendor just because they were beautiful. That evening, I sat in my apartment watching the sunset turn the sky into a watercolor of pinks and purples. Marcus the cat was purring on my lap, a warm weight that anchored me to the present. My phone was quiet. My mind was quiet. For the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for anyone to validate my existence. I wasn't performing usefulness in hopes of earning love. I wasn't shrinking myself to fit into spaces too small for my actual shape. I was just being. The doorbell rang, unexpected and jarring. I rarely had unannounced visitors. Through the peephole, I saw Charlotte standing in the hallway, looking younger and more uncertain than I'd ever seen her. I debated not answering, but curiosity won again. Hi, she said when I opened the door. I know I should have called. Can I come in? I stepped aside wordlessly. She entered tentatively, as if the apartment might contain traps. Her designer clothes looked slightly rumpled, her usually perfect makeup smudged around the eyes. I've been seeing a therapist, she announced without preamble. A real one, not the kind Mom sends people to for prescription refills. I gestured to the couch. Would you like some tea? Do you have wine? I poured 2 glasses of Sancerre, the good stuff I'd started buying once I stopped subsidizing other people's champagne tastes. We sat on opposite ends of the couch, the space between us feeling like an ocean. I wanted to apologize, Charlotte said finally. Not the family apology where we pretend nothing happened, a real one. I waited. I've been thinking about that brunch, about what Mom said, about what we all didn't say. She took a shaky sip of wine. My therapist asked me to describe each family member. I went on for 20 minutes about James's achievements and Mom's parties and Dad's career. When she asked about you, I realized I didn't know anything except that you were good with numbers. The words stung, but distantly, like remembering an old injury. 32 years, Charlotte continued. You're my sister for 32 years, and I couldn't tell her your favorite color or what you do for fun or if you've ever been in love. I couldn't even remember the name of your company. Harbinger Capital, I supplied automatically. I know that now. I looked it up. You're kind of a big deal, aren't you? There are articles about you in financial journals. Forbes mentioned you in a piece about women in hedge funds. You researched me. I had to. How fucked up is that I had to Google my own sister to learn anything about her life? Tears started sliding down her face, but she didn't move to wipe them. Do you know what I found out? You donated a wing to the children's hospital. The same hospital where Dad works, and he never mentioned it. I hadn't known he knew. The donation had been anonymous, but I supposed hospital administrators talked. It wasn't about him, I said quietly. I know. That's what makes it worse. You did this incredible thing, and it wasn't for recognition or to make the family look good. You just did it because you could help. We sat in silence while Charlotte cried. I didn't comfort her. Some distances are too vast to cross with a hug. I'm not asking for forgiveness, she said eventually. I'm not asking to be back in your life. I just needed you to know that I see it now. What we did. What I did. And I'm sorry. Thank you, I said, meaning it. She finished her wine and stood to leave. At the door, she paused. Your favorite color. What is it? Green, I said, like the forest. Green, she repeated. I'll remember that. After she left, I sat in the gathering darkness, processing the unexpected visit. It didn't change anything, not really. One apology couldn't erase decades of invisibility. But it was something. A crack in the Foster family facade. Proof that at least one of them was capable of growth. My phone buzzed. Marcus, asking about dinner plans. I smiled, texting back suggestions for the Thai place we'd been wanting to try. This was my life now. Simple. Authentic connections with people who saw me. Work that challenged and fulfilled me. The freedom to choose how I spent my time and resources. No more command performances at family gatherings where I existed as a convenient service rather than a beloved daughter. Some might see it as a smaller life, fewer people, less drama, no grand family legacy to uphold. But to me, it felt expansive, like stepping out of a cramped room into an open field. The Foster family would continue their story without me. They'd adapt, evolve, maybe even thrive in ways they couldn't when they had useful Madeline to lean on. Or perhaps they'd simply find another person to fill that role. It wasn't my concern anymore. I had my own story to write now, one where I was the protagonist, not the supporting character, where my worth wasn't measured in services rendered, but in the simple fact of my existence. The city lights twinkled beyond my windows, millions of other stories unfolding in the darkness. Somewhere across town, my family was probably gathering for dinner, adapting to their new normal. I wished them well, distantly, the way you might think kindly of strangers you passed on the street. But I didn't wish myself back at their table. That seat had always been uncomfortable, positioned as it was on the margins of their affection. Better to build my own table, choose my own guests, create my own definition of family. Marcus the cat jumped onto my lap, purring his approval of this philosophical direction. Or perhaps he was just hungry. Either way, I stroked his fur and felt grateful for the simple pleasure of being wanted for who I was, not what I could provide. Tomorrow would bring new challenges at work, new opportunities to use my skills for something meaningful. The soup kitchen was planning an expansion, and I had ideas about funding strategies. My book club was diving into a new novel. Marcus the human had tickets to a concert he thought I'd enjoy. A full life, a chosen life, a life where I mattered. As I sat in my quiet apartment with my purring cat and my nice wine and my hard-won peace, I thought about that morning at brunch. Mother's words still echoed sometimes, "Don't think you matter." But she was wrong. I had always mattered, just not to them. And that, I finally understood, was their loss, not mine.